And now we're going to shift gears completely. I was driving up Empire Grade Tuesday, and I saw what looked like a rock concert. There were hundreds of people clogging the roads where you're not even supposed to park, walking down the road and heading into the Arboretum. What were they after? A stinky corpse flower. Now, that ought to tell you something, and I just wanted to bring in Martin Quigley, who is the head of the Arboretum, and he's going to tell us what was all the buzz about.
Well, when the Washington Zoo has another panda cub born, people line up for days and weeks to get their first glimpse of it. But it's very rare for a plant to be the subject of such popularity and people wanting and needing to see it. But this is a unique plant, and part of it is it's just so big and dramatic in the way it looks. How big is it? Well, ours reached 5.5 feet, but a mature one, ours isn't quite mature, could get up to 9 or 10 feet. It's a single inflorescence. That means it has many tiny little male and female flowers on the stalk that makes it look like a flower.
All right. How many people said, "Feed me, Seymour," when they walked in the door?
Unfortunately, I said it more than most people just to get their attentions. But no, this... Really, the corpse plant, the corpse flower, was one of the 3 plant models for Audrey in The Little Shop of Horrors now 30 years ago. And it's still a fun movie. Go on Netflix tonight and watch Little Shop of Horrors. But Audrey has the huge purple lips that the Amorphophallus does. And also the spadix, which is the sticky uppy part, was the tongue for Audrey in that movie.
That is so fun. Little pop culture reference there. So how many people do you think came through your doors over that period? And are they still coming, and is it still there?
No. Several thousand people came. We don't really have a choke point where we could count people, plus which we had people at night and people during the day. And it was over a long time. We're very understaffed at the Arboretum. There was no way to count the numbers. But I'm estimating at least a couple thousand, maybe 2,500.
This was your moment. This is like, the moment for the Arboretum where everybody discovered it and its plant.
Right, but then there were these ups and downs, so there was some chagrin. When we thought that it was opening last week, it was within the window when all the signals on the plant were correct. The color was changing. It was changing shape, amorphophallus, so a penis changing shape. All that was starting to happen.
I'm liking this already.
Right. Well, I mean, Amorphophallus titanum. What does that mean? Shape-shifting penis, very, very big.
No wonder everyone came to see it.
Well, that, and it's famous for the horrible scent that it puts out. When the female flowers are receptive, the whole big thing opens up in a matter of hours that afternoon, and it puts out a scent that is carried by heat generated from the plant itself. It's really unusual to have a plant generate its own heat. So the heat carries this stench up from what is a huge nasty potpourri down at the base of the inflorescence. That stench goes up through the forest canopy in a very thick jungle, so it needs the heat to get it up there. That body heat, that heat of the plant is the same as our body heat, 9,800 degrees.
Wow.
So it's pretty unusual. Anyway, that draws many female insects, mostly flies, that want to lay their eggs in dead meat. And so they come closer and closer. They see that spadix glowing away because they can see that heat as light in the infrared spectrum, which we can't. So that's cool. They come down. The female flies finally have gotten there. They're heavy with eggs. They crawl all the way down inside the flower, and there's no meat. So they're very disgusted and annoyed. And so some of them go to sleep. And the next morning, the female flowers of the Amorphophallus have done 6 hours of business the night before. They close at midnight. That's it for them. So how do these flowers cross-pollinate in a jungle where they're very, very sparsely populated? The next morning, the females wake up. These poor bugs, they crawl back out, but by then, the male flowers have opened up. The bugs pick up some of that, and hopefully within 12 hours, they'll find another Amorphophallus and spread some pollen on that one's female flowers. This whole thing is about sex in a most intimate way. It's about reproduction without self-pollinating. We all know that inbreeding tends to shallow the gene pool, and so inbreeding is to be avoided. And plants have many unique and strangely weird ways of avoiding pollinating each other and yet having both sexes on the same plant. But this is one of the most unusual because of the heat it puts out and the stink. And of course, I was trying to stimulate the crowds by telling them what it smelled like, which is a dead cow in the hallway, rotting away with a layer of feces and maybe some vomit and some dead fish sprinkled on top.
And the thousands of people wanted to smell this thing.
They did. Well, it's like roadkill. You have to get closer. I mean, it's nasty. It's awful, but
but you can't look away. It's the bystander effect. But they didn't just look. They didn't just drive by and like glance at it. They came there specifically to sniff this thing. So you must be kind of exhausted. You had to talk to thousands of people and tell them the same lurid tale again and again. Did you have a microphone?
Sex in the night. I did not have a microphone, and I really needed one. Yeah. My voice is, my throat's still sore from almost a week of admonishing the crowds. But it was fun. Everybody really got into it. I mean, and then, so the irony was, here's the big disappointment. Last Friday, it started opening. It was late afternoon. It started to smell. I was playing with my little COVID thermometer, my hands-free thermometer on the plant, and it said 87 degrees. And I thought, oh, my God, it's heating up because outside, what was it, 68 or less. So here it is already 20 degrees warmer than the ambient air. And so I called a couple of news places, and it was too late. Anyway, we weren't prepared for it, but people came streaming in that night, and I was promised that I'd stay open until 11 the night that it opened. So we were trying to, but 9 o'clock, the flower had stopped. It stopped opening. It stopped the heat. It got cold.
Maybe it
shut
got
down.
shy.
It didn't get shy. It got cold. It was Santa Cruz in the evening time in July. The fog came in. It was too cold, and it just shut down. So pessimistic me thought, oh, my God, we've killed it, and it's aborted. It will never do it again. But we let it sit there for a few days. There was talk of an autopsy.
Wait, that's where I want to stop you there because I read that, and I thought, no, don't take her apart. She might still bloom after all.
Well,
I thought you were going to kill the thing before it had a chance to bloom.
Autopsies on plants don't really work anyway. They kind of just rot. There's no real cause of death you can get out of it. And I'm probably absolutely sure it was the temperature. So 3 days later, we had closed for the day on Monday. It was a normal working day, and people were still coming to see the plant, of course. That happened all through Saturday and Sunday. But on Monday, after work hours, 2 employees had stayed late to do stuff, and they noticed that it was opening up, and not just slowly. You could see the big red lips furling back from this huge, huge phallic shape, and it started to stink in a big way. So a few phone calls were made, got a couple of the media there, and because the females are only receptive that one night for 6 hours, and because our male pollen wouldn't be ready until the next day, we had got some pollen frozen and sent from the Huntington Garden, which has a collection of these plants, and they froze some pollen last month. So they sent it to us, FedEx, the way you'd send semen for prize bulls or racehorses or something like that. Anyway, we pollinated that night at 10, and the next day we opened up. It was on all the news outlets, lots of crowds, and people came to smell it. The only unfortunate thing is the main stink comes the first day when the female flowers are open. They're the more important ones. The second day, there's a little bit of stink. Well, should ask my ex-wife how much the Y chromosome is really worth.
Yeah.
Anyway, the male chromosome is very insignificant compared to the female. That's why the sperm travel while the eggs stay in place. So we pollinated it, and then the next afternoon when our male flowers opened, we collected pollen for somebody else. And guess what? Today we got an email from Washington State University in Washington State, and their flowers due to bloom in a couple of days. We thought we were the last one. All over the country, they've been blooming through June and July. So we were one of the last that I knew of. If you go on YouTube right now, there's 25 different videos of people doing all sorts of torturous things to these wonderful flowers.
I was going to say, the entire story is so high tech compared to how they do it in the jungle.
Do it in the jungle is so high tech. Who knows of a plant that, there are only 1,000 left in the wild. This is an important conservation fact. There is lowland tropical jungle, Borneo, Sumatra, Indonesia. Same habitat as the orangutans, which are the poster children for tropical deforestation at the equator. So this plant, which is about the same number in the wild, 1,000 plants in the wild, widely dispersed population, one flower might be 10 miles from the next one. This is a way to escape predation on their juicy little corm. So they bloom only after 10 years of building up a big enough bulb. The bulb becomes 35 pounds and looks like a cheese wheel only brown. And finally, that plant has made one leaf every year. Every year the corm gets bigger. Every year the leaf gets bigger. Finally, it's got enough energy. But this all happens within a matter of days. So 10 years whittles down to a matter of days. And the sexual part, the really, really juicy part, happens within 24 hours. So it's an amazing mechanism, and that's part of its appeal, that it's so elaborate, and yet it's the product of evolution. It's a series of random genetic changes.
How did the Arboretum get one of these rare plants?
Well, about 12 years ago, Davis got some seeds from one of the other gardens. They had them in the last 30 years. They've been around to all the big botanic gardens and university greenhouses. So a lot of people have them now. Anyway, they sent us 3 tiny corms, 2 of which didn't make it through the succeeding years, but this last one did, up in a very small tropical greenhouse at the top of campus, hidden in the woods. And for those of you listening who are appalled by the traffic, and for those of you who are even more disappointed by the fact that it didn't bloom when we said it would, it's because we took it out of that tropical greenhouse and brought it down to the Arboretum Plaza where more people could see it. And in doing so, we exposed it to those 10 nights of Santa Cruz fog. So luckily it did bloom, and the plant has now been pollinated. The flower has collapsed. The whole big structure, that massive penis, dropped over like a rotten cucumber. It's just a
great imagery.
A bunch of mush now. Well, we know what happens after sex. And so the plant has now retreated to the greenhouse, where we hope those pollinated female flowers will develop into little fruits the size of grapes, which are eaten by birds when they ripen 6 months from now, and dispersed through the jungle. This time we hope to harvest ripened fruit and save the seeds and germinate them ourselves.
So you could have many of these little...
Well, it's just like Little Shop of Horrors at the end, when you realize Audrey has spread her seeds. He has reproduced.
Yes, I remember that. It's a great scene. So that might happen here in Santa Cruz.
Not really.
But you can't replant them in the jungle somewhere.
No. I mean, it's all about habitat destruction now. The fact that gardens like the Arboretum and the UCSC greenhouses, Jim Velzy and Sylvie Childress, have for 10 years been caring for that plant just for its big moment, and then it was taken down to the Arboretum for display.
Did they cry?
I don't know, maybe a tear was shed. It was an emotional moment.
Yeah, it was a long wait to have a baby, 10
but
years.
Most of the time, it just hangs out there. Even in the jungle, it's very anonymous. It's got big camouflage-colored leaves, just one leaf per year.
Wow, that's slow.
And then it goes dormant. And then, so it's a bulb. It spends part of its year underground. Just like the naked lilies that are now coming up. I was asking the crowds, the naked lilies are starting. Here are these pink flowers popping up from the dirt. Where are the leaves? How do those bulbs get their energy? Well, they got their energy from the leaves that were up above ground last rainy season. All 3 rainfalls that made up our so-called rainy season last winter. But in any case, these plants stored up their energy for 10 years with a single giant leaf every year until they were 35 pounds and could send up a flower.
That's such a great story. And it almost ended in catastrophe when it was chopped apart to see if it was
No. I wouldn't have let that happen. I thought it was a bad idea. But the sentimental, we got to find out what happened to it. But you can't really do that with plants.
No, they don't tell the story about who killed who.
Right.
But what a great story. So we're probably, none of us can be around for its next bloom, or maybe we will.
No, not at all. Once it's reached its mature bulb stage, it will now bloom every 3 or 4 years.
Oh, cool.
It just needs a couple years to get its energy back up, because it put out this 5.5-foot tall inflorescence in 8 weeks.
Wow.
10 weeks ago, it was just a bulb underground.
And there's a time-lapse photograph of this happening on your website, I think.
That's
somewhere.
The last 2 hours. Yeah, the last 2 hours when it actually opens up, you can practically see it, which is another cool thing. Here's this giant thing that's supposed to be a plant, and now it's opening up like a peacock somehow, spreading all its array.
And it's beautiful color, green and red, so it's very fancy on top of it all.
Plus, which that red, when those bugs come flying in and they can see because they've got the infrared light from the heat, that red, beautiful purple black color is the same as a plate of rotting meat. So it's the perfect
Good
color. Drying blood.
Now, did a bunch of flies come?
Some flies did, but it was cool. I mean, it's Santa Cruz in the evening in the fog, so there aren't that many flies. There were some. There were a couple species. The house flies were there. They always come to the picnic. They want rotting meat, and they want your burgers. And there were some ants swarming around the bottom, too. They like meat once in a while as well.
What about yellow jackets? They're always to the picnic.
Not at night. The yellow jackets go underground at night, so they were not there.
So what's next for the Arboretum now that this newfound cult status has been conferred upon you, just like the San Diego Zoo and its pandas? Are you able to get more visitors now that...
I don't know. It's almost like a one-hit wonder, this great song, everybody loved it. And then what happens next? Well, now we wait a couple of years, unless we get germination from some of these. If the fruits take and they ripen and the seeds ripen, we could get young ones, and then who knows what we'll do. But this is not something that happens frequently. That's also part of the mystery. If you know voodoo lilies, I don't know how many of you are around in Santa Cruz in an older house. You'll often walk out the door one day in May, and for the first time ever, you'll smell what smells like a rotting dog. Something died in the front garden. And it's a voodoo lily, a relation of the Amorphophallus. It's a little black and purple jack-in-the-pulpit, calla lilies with the white spathe and the yellow little spadix like a penis. And the anthuriums, the pink waxy ones at Valentine's Day.
Diego Rivera painted them a lot.
That's right.
Easter
Well, because
lily.
it's so sexual, and Georgia O'Keeffe made it look like vulva and penis for sure. Mm-hmm. So the arum family is worldwide, mostly tropical. But if you're from the East, you might remember jack-in-the-pulpits. All of these things pop out of the ground and stink. And the voodoo lily here in Santa Cruz, because it doesn't bloom every year, most people are unaware they have them and maybe never even see the flower because it only lasts 3 days, the same as this Amorphophallus. Very fast turnover. Attract those insects, fertilize your female flowers, and then fade away.
I just want to give a plug to the Arboretum in general for the public who's never been there, because on any given day, especially on Tuesdays when it's free if you're a cheapskate, but if you're not, it's only $5 or something. 10, sorry.
10 for adults.
Okay, 10.
Free for members.
Yes. You can walk these endless paths, seemingly endless paths that have really exotic, strange
Let
looking
me tell you what
New
those
Zealand
exotic flowers are. Forget the New Zealand. That's not a Mediterranean climate. The rest of the garden, Mediterranean climate. Hot, dry summers, no rain. Cool, moist winters, less moist than they used to be. Summer fires and summer fogs. That defines the Mediterranean climate. The collections we have, except for the New Zealand, which is a temperate climate, are Mediterranean climate places. There are only 5 in the world, and we're one of them here in California. So these plants, especially the Australian and South African ones, are already adapted to the conditions we're still facing. Hotter summers, drier summers. And in fact, we don't really have 4 seasons in Santa Cruz. Mediterranean climates have a wet season and a not so wet season. And unfortunately, the dry season is getting longer and longer. So these plants in the Arboretum, some of them bloom for 11 or 12 months of the year. Exotic flowers you'll never see anywhere else in Northern Hemisphere, or certainly not elsewhere in North America, only here. The temperatures in Florida are kind of the same, but Florida's a monsoon climate like Bangladesh. The rains come in the heat. The hurricanes are in the hot summer season. So we have our blooming season, our spring. When the advertisers say spring flowers at the Arboretum, it's April, it's May. No, our spring is when dormancy ends. That's when the rains come. So my point about the Arboretum is you will see the gardens of tomorrow for the Central Coast, the plants that don't need summer irrigation, and they bloom like mad. And that's, I think, what we're aiming for. Our public outreach, we do a lot of science and a lot of exchange with labs and nurseries all over the country and the world. But our local message is these are the plants that you don't have to fight to keep alive. They're not drought tolerant. They're drought loving. They need that drought. And people, the way people kill their succulents, they kill their Australians by giving them water in the summer. If you want to water those plants at all, it's in the winter when you have a bad winter. So this past winter, you should have been watering your shrubbery in February and March. Not drag out the hose in August, because then the plants will break dormancy. They're going dormant because of the heat. They're sleeping. Like your lawns, if you didn't keep treating them with water and fertilizer, grasses go dormant. They don't die, but people now see a brown or yellow lawn and they assume it's dead. It's just sleeping. When the rains come back, so does the grass. Think of the California hills in the springtime. When the rainy season is on by December, the hills green up. Everyone thought those grasses were dead all year.
And some of these plants you can purchase for your own garden.
We sell them at our gift shop, and we're obliged to raise money because, I must say, the university does not fund the Arboretum. We get nothing in operational or salary funding. We are dependent on donations, bequests, and we really, really want you to come. So do not assume that because we're part of the university we are funded by them. We are not.
Well, I really appreciate you coming down, and you deserve a well-deserved rest after entertaining folks around that giant plant for the past 4 or 5 days. So thank you, Martin Quigley, Director of the Arboretum. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is KSQD Santa Cruz, 90.7 FM, your community radio station for the Monterey Bay. KSQD Santa Cruz is nonprofit, listener-supported public radio station, and we don't get any corporate advertising whatsoever either. But we're so glad you're on board to support us. We really, really appreciate it. One of our great features is First Person Singular, short stories by members of the public. Here's one now, and that's going to be followed by a wonderful rerun of a Talk of the Bay that's talking about our rights. Plus, the Santa Cruz Naturalist after that. Stay tuned. This is K-Squid. I'm Rachel Ann Goodman. Thank you for listening.